Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If a Venerated Soul Reincarnated in Danmachi world. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 211, Battle in the 24th Floor Part 1. Haha, you must all be wondering how I ended up like this. Olivas said as he spread both arms wide in a grand gesture. Well, it's quite simple. I heard his call, and I answered. Now I possess a level of strength that you ants couldn't possibly comprehend. Ha 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 ha. He continued to laugh hysterically, peeling strips of flesh from his own face as he did. A few minutes ago, when Olivas was still bound and unconscious. Olivas act. An unknown voice called out from somewhere deep within his mind. At first, there was only darkness. A suffocating, endless void. Then Olivas found himself being forcefully pulled, and the scenery around him shifted. Where am I? He looked around at the unfamiliar surroundings. Olivas act. It seems you find yourself in quite a bind. The voice echoed again, layered and distorted, as if countless whispers were speaking in unison. A powerful presence entered his line of sight. Olivas lifted his head and found a mysterious figure seated upon a throne, its face obscured and unreadable. The Almighty. Recognition flashed through his eyes before he could even question it. The words stumbled out of him in a stutter as he immediately lowered his head, gripped by instinctive fear. You stand at the edge of despair. Broken and weak. The words struck something deep. Images flooded Olivas' mind uninvited. His failures. His defeat. His humiliation. The moment he had been forced to acknowledge how insignificant he truly was in the face of real power. He clenched his teeth, his consciousness trembling. He tried to speak, but no sound came. His body refused to respond, shackled both physically and mentally. The darkness stirred. Something vast shifted within it, a presence so overwhelming that his own thoughts felt microscopic by comparison. But I can change that. A sensation like countless fingers brushed against his soul. I will lend you power. Olivas' breathing grew erratic, even within his unconscious state. Power. Yes. The whisper drew closer. Power to crush those who looked down on you. Power to tear apart the ones who chained you. Power to stand above all others. A pulse throbbed through his entire body. His heart convulsed violently. But there is a price. I have created a new spell, and you will serve as my test subject. Whether you lose your sanity or suffer any other side effects in the process is of no concern to me. Knowing this, will you still accept? Silence followed. For a brief moment, something resembling hesitation flickered on Olivas' face. Then, if I accept, he uttered weakly, desperation bleeding through every word. Will I never be humiliated again? At his question, the figure laughed. A sound so deep and vile it felt like it was being carved directly into the fabric of his existence. No. Then I accept. The moment those words left his lips, something answered. Arg. Black veins surged through his body, twisting unnaturally beneath his skin. His heartbeat doubled. Tripled. Bones shifted. Muscles tore and reformed. His scream never reached the surface. Good. The voice whispered one last time. From this moment on, you are my vessel. Back in the present. Olivas' laughter echoed unnaturally through the pantry. Rejoice. His eyes burned with an inhuman light. You are about to witness the power of the one who answered his call. The moment the last word left his mouth, his figure vanished and reappeared directly in front of Elise and Kagaya in an instant. Both of them were caught off guard by the sheer speed, but reacted immediately, swinging their swords toward him in the same motion. Two deadly silver arcs threatened to cut him clean in half. Olivos simply grinned. What? Kagaya's eyes went wide as Olivos let the blades connect, making no attempt to block or dodge, simply standing there and taking both hits head-on. And yet their swords barely sank a few millimeters into his flesh. It felt as though they had just struck solid adamantite. Were attacks from first-class adventurers always this soft? Hee, now I understand how Gluttony felt. This kind of strength is simply intoxicating. Olivos cackled, his expression completely unhinged. But Elise and Kagaya refused to be deterred. They pressed their assault, striking with everything they had, targeting vital points without hesitation. Even after hundreds of slashes, Olivos absorbed every single one of them without so much as flinching. TSK, nothing is working. A bead of sweat traced its way down Kagaya's face. It's useless, you Astria Familia bitches. Everything you do is futile. Soon, both of you will join the rest of your familia that died 5 years ago. Olivos said with a mocking smile. Kagaya, work with me. We're taking this guy down. The two exchanged a glance. Their figures blurred as they each gathered their mind, preparing their magic simultaneously. Sensing the shift in their magic power, Olivos' grin stretched so wide it nearly reached his ears. Bring it on! He spread both arms open. They came at him from both sides. With the years they had spent fighting alongside each other, their coordination was seamless, precise in a way that only came from absolute familiarity. Even Olivos felt a flicker of genuine danger from them. Agarus Alvacinth. Goku. Both spells landed simultaneously. A combination that would have pressured even a level 6 and potentially dealt a fatal blow. However, was that all? Against what Olivos had become, it wasn't enough. Damn it! Kagaya cursed as Olivos seized both of their blades with his bare hands. He had done it with ease. His posture hadn't even shifted. I'll give you both credit for that. If it were the old me, I would have gone down right there, he said as he tightened his grip. Cracks spiderwebbed across both blades as they began to deform under the pressure. Now then, prepare to face my WR dash. A fist connected with his face before he could finish the sentence, cutting his words short and sending him skidding several meters back. Your opponent from this point on is me, Judas said in a cold, even voice, having already finished healing himself. He glanced back at Elise and Kagaya, both of them bent over and gasping for breath. Thanks for holding out. Ha! Shut up. I don't need your thanks. Go deal with that freak. Kagaya spat, wiping the sweat from her brow. Don't let your guard down just yet, Kagaya. We've still got work to do, Elise said as she turned her head and locked eyes with Rivas. Chapter 212, The Venerated 1 vs Olivos Act Part 1. After getting blown back by Judas, Olivos quickly regrouped with Rivas, who stood off to the side. What are you doing standing around like an idiot? If you don't want me to devour your magic stone, stop being useless this instant. Olivos snapped, bearing down on Rivas with a suffocating pressure and a gaze full of contempt. Rivas nearly choked. She took a step back, gritting her teeth. She shot a glare in his direction. What? Got something to say? Olivos grinned. His right arm flickered and his hand closed around Rivas' throat, lifting her off the ground. Rivas struggled, clawing at his grip as she tried to break free. Seeing that expression on her face gave him a deep sense of satisfaction. She already knew what this was. Olivos was petty and vindictive, and this was his way of getting back at her for how she had treated him before all of this. No. I will do what you ask. She forced the words out with difficulty. For now, the dynamic between them had shifted, and she had no choice but to swallow her pride. Olivos snorted and released her, shoving her roughly aside. Good. While I deal with Judas Spade, go handle the rest of them and take back the jewel they've stolen. Rivas steadied herself, biting down the anger that surged up her throat, and picked up her sword. Her gaze swept over Elise and the others. "Captain, what do we do?" a member of the Hermes Familia asked as Rivas began to close the distance. Asfi felt a bead of cold sweat trail down her back. "We fight. Everyone, provide support to Scarlet Harnal and Yamato Rindu," she said as she drew her weapon. "Lillian, if you can manage it, try to wake Vanergand. We need every bit of combat power we have for this," she added, glancing toward the brown-skinned Therianthrope, who responded with a sharp salute. Physical boost. Strengthening magic. Judas cast both spells without a word. A soft glow washed over the group as the magic took hold. It felt as though strength had been poured directly into their bodies. This magic. Asfi clenched her fist once and felt the difference immediately. She gave Judas a quiet nod of appreciation. Elise and Kagaya, already familiar with the feeling, offered brief words of thanks. Lafia turned to look at him with open admiration in her eyes, but by then, Rivas had already arrived and the two sides collided. "Everyone, battle formation!" Asfi shouted and threw herself into the fight alongside her familia. While that side erupted into chaos, Judas hadn't once taken his eyes off Olivas. Olivas stared back with a wide, crooked smile. "Ah, while the weaklings sort each other out, I hope you won't mind me returning the favor and ripping you in half, just like what you did to me earlier, Judas Spade." "You can try," Judas replied without changing his expression. "But you will fail." Let's see how calm you are when I'm finished with you," Olivas said as his figure vanished. The speed he displayed far outstripped anything Judas had seen from a level 6 up to this point. Even so, Judas read the trajectory and stepped clear of the punch Olivas had hurled at him. "You caught me off guard the last time. That won't happen again." He raised his arm as a crimson magic circle blazed to life in front of him. Infernal barrage. The circle expanded violently as torrents of compressed fire erupted forward like a volley of meteors, each blast tearing through the air and warping the space around it. The terrain behind Olivas was reduced to ash and splintered debris in seconds. Tisk. Olivas clicked his tongue and twisted mid-motion, his body blurring as he threaded between the explosions with inhuman agility. Even so, he wasn't fast enough to clear all of them. The left half of his body was swallowed by the flames. When he emerged on the other side, the scorched half of his body looked no different from charcoal. Burns that would have made anyone else scream and crumple had barely drawn a reaction. He was grinning. "Ha ha ha. Is that it? You'll have to do better than that." He drove his foot into the ground, shattering the stone beneath him, and closed the distance in an instant. Judas' eyes narrowed. Olivas' fist came down with the weight of a mountain. Judas threw up a barrier and crossed his arms, bracing. Boom! The impact detonated outward. A shockwave tore across the battlefield as Judas was driven back several meters, his boots carving deep grooves into the floor before he found his footing. "Oh! You didn't break. Impressive." Olivas cracked his neck. Judas exhaled slowly. "Your strength is unstable. And it's not just your body, your mind is deteriorating as well," he said, his voice completely level. Olivas' grin twitched. "Ha!" The muscles in his face spasmed. Black veins pulsed violently beneath his skin. "Deteriorating?" he repeated, his voice dropping for a split second before climbing back up into unhinged laughter. "You think I don't know that?" His aura erupted chaotically. His right arm ballooned at an alarming rate and one side of his face began to bubble and shift beneath the skin like something was pressing outward from within. His body was growing more grotesque by the second and it was plain for anyone to see. "I don't care, as long as I crush every last person who ever looked down on me beneath my feet," he screamed and launched himself forward. At the very least, he has without a doubt reached the realm of level 7. Judas thought as he assessed his opponent. Even so, compared to the Death Knight and Althea, he is nowhere near the same league. Olivas reappeared from above, both fists driving down in a devastating overhead smash. Judas met him head-on. Fist met fist. Shockwave after shockwave tore outward from each exchange, the pantry shuddering around them as the two clashed without letting up. Chapter 213, The Venerated 1 vs. Olivas Act Part 2. Just the aftershocks from the battle between Judas and Olivas were enough to rattle the entirety of the 24th floor. Adventurer parties who happened to be present on the floor felt the tremors even from the opposite side. Whoa! This shaking! I heard there was something weird going on this floor, but to think it's to this extent. Is there something happening on the 24th floor? Adventurers murmured in confusion. Who cares? Let's run and report this to the guild. Whatever is causing trouble, it's clearly beyond what we can handle. An adventurer with enough brain cells to clearly survive a horror movie spoke up, and the others nodded without hesitation. Within the pantry itself, the effects of the battle were even more intense. Colorful explosions erupted from magical attacks, accompanied by violent shockwaves each time the two absolute powerhouses clashed against one another. Judas quickly realized the scale of destruction their battle could cause. If this keeps up, this pantry area will be destroyed, crushing everyone within it. He looked down at the ground as a plan formed in his mind. Where do you think you are looking, huh? Olivas suddenly appeared in front of him, arms cocked back and fist clenched. Earth cocoon. The ground around them trembled as massive chunks of earth rose at Judas' command. The stones converged on Olivas from every direction before sealing shut around him completely. A giant sphere of earth the size of a house appeared in front of him. It was significantly larger than the one he had used on Bet, considering the strength of the opponent trapped inside. Judas then pointed a single finger toward the ground. Sinkhole. The earth groaned before splitting apart beneath them, swallowing itself as a massive hole tore open in the floor, dropping straight down to the 25th floor below. But he didn't stop there. Floor after floor, the tunnel continued to bore downward at his will, punching through each successive level one after another until it finally bottomed out deep within the dungeon's depths. The 37th floor. Suddenly, the giant ball of earth in front of him cracked like an egg before bursting open, large chunks of stone flying in every direction. Olivas emerged with a twisted scream, blaring in Judas' direction. Let's fight somewhere else. Judas spoke quietly. But by the time the words had even left his mouth, he had already moved. His figure blurred across the distance in an instant, his palm driving straight into Olivas' face before the man could even process what had happened. His fingers closed around the man's skull like a vice. And without another word, Judas hurled himself, and Olivas, into the sinkhole. Judas, good luck. Please be safe. Both Elise and Lafia spoke with worry in their voices. Even Kagaya tightened her grip on her sword. The thought of fighting by his side naturally crossed their minds, but they held back, knowing they would only get in his way. Likewise, there was a different opponent they needed to confront at this moment. Everyone, please focus. She's coming. Asfi spoke just as Rivas made her move. Hearing this, everyone finally turned their heads and focused on the enemy before them. None of you are going to make it out of this alive. Rivas spoke with a cold voice, her presence exuding thick killing intent. Judas could feel the wind brushing past his skin as he forcefully dragged Olivas with him while they plummeted downward, floor after floor rushing past in a blur. Let go of me. Olivas thrashed violently in his grip the entire way down, his bubbling, writhing body twisting and contorting as he clawed and slammed his fists against Judas' arm. Judas felt the bones in his arms snap into pieces. Waves of pain shot through him, but he held on without flinching, his grip ironclad as they descended even faster. Then the 37th floor rose up to meet them. They hit the ground like a meteor. The impact was catastrophic, a deafening crash that sent a shockwave rippling outward in every direction. The dungeon floor cratered beneath them as chunks of stone and debris were launched high into the air. Cracks spider-webbed across the ground for dozens of meters in every direction. The dust settled slowly. At the center of the crater, Judas stood upright, breathing hard, but still standing. Olivas lay at his feet, embedded in the broken earth beneath him. Where are we? Judas muttered as he looked around, his arm hanging weakly at his side. Although he had once reached the 37th floor with Ace and Riveria when they went to defeat Eudeus, it wasn't as if they had explored every part of the floor. There were still many areas he was unfamiliar with. Don't tell me. Are we in the Colosseum? Looking left and right, Judas realized they stood within a massive structure eerily shaped like a stadium. Monsters filled the arena, and every single one of them turned to stare in their direction the moment they arrived. The Colosseum. The largest chamber on the floor, a place where monsters constantly fought one another. The room spawned monsters endlessly until a certain number was reached, and each time that number decreased, it was immediately replenished. An unlimited supply of monsters. Easily one of the most dangerous locations in the dungeon. Skull Sheep. Spartoi. Loup-garou. Paludas. Monsters that had no business appearing anywhere above the deep floors filled every corner of the arena. And every single pair of eyes was now locked onto them with undisguised hostility. Roar! The moment the first wave surged toward them, Judas was already moving. Rising Whirlwind. Water Cannon. Firestorm. Detonate. For spells fired off in rapid succession in 4 directions, each tearing into the charging horde without mercy. Wind, water, fire, and raw explosive force collided with the mass of monsters all at once. However, while he was briefly distracted by the surrounding horde, Judas felt a small gust of wind brush against his skin. His instincts screamed a warning. He turned his head just in time to see Olivas, already back on his feet, driving a fist straight toward his face. Wrath of the Celestial Titan. Judas retaliated with a punch of his own. The 2 fists collided with each other's faces at the same time, sending both men flying to opposite ends of the Colosseum and crashing violently into the walls. The resulting chain reaction lit up the arena in a violent cascade of explosions that shook the walls and sent debris raining down from the ceiling above. I know I'm the one who brought us here, but why the Colosseum of all places? Judas thought as he coughed up a mouthful of blood, slowly prying himself free from the pile of rubble he had been buried under. He straightened and looked around. Monsters to the left. Monsters to the right. Monsters pouring in from every direction the arena had to offer, their collective roars shaking his eardrums. Monsters, monsters, more monsters. Then movement caught his eye from across the arena. Olivas exploded out of the rubble on the opposite side, dark veins rapidly spreading across his grotesque, bubbling body like cracks spreading across breaking stone. His gaze instantly locked onto Judas. And without a moment's hesitation, he charged. No matter where Judas looked, there was nothing but enemies in sight. The killing intent saturating the air was so dense he could practically taste it on his tongue. A corner of his mouth slowly curved upward. A brutal free-for-all? Surrounded by enemies on all sides? Fine by me. Chapter 214, Battle in the 24th Floor Part 2. On the other side of the battlefield. Riva's blade crashed against Elise's, sparks flying as Kaguya slid in from the side, her katana striking in perfect coordination. Don't let her control the pace. Elise shouted, forcing her aching body to move. Riva snarled, her eyes gleaming with murderous intent. Annoying. All of you should just die already. Asfi barked orders from behind them, the members of the Hermes Familia firing support magic and projectiles to limit Riva's movement. But despite their combined efforts, they could all feel the pressure. Every exchange made it clear that defeating Rivas was not going to be easy. The longer this battle continues, the more injuries our side will suffer. We're in a precarious situation where a fragile balance has been established. All we need is one more element to tip the scales in our favor. Liliun, please hurry. Asfi thought with a tense expression. Meanwhile, Lilian could be seen crouching off to the side, repeatedly slapping the unconscious Bet in an attempt to wake him up. Come on, you lazy wolf. I know you nearly died just then, but we need your help right about now. She had slapped him so many times that his cheeks had turned red and slightly swollen. Just as Lilian was about to deliver another slap, Bet's eyes suddenly snapped open. Ah! A scream burst from Bet's lips as he abruptly sat up. Pain radiated from both sides of his face, the imprint of Lillian's hand still lingering as he raised his palms to touch them in confusion. Lillian, who had been mid-swing for another slap, flinched in surprise. She quickly halted her arm, hid both hands behind her back, and began whistling innocently. What the hell happened? Why does my face hurt so much? Bet grumbled while rubbing his cheeks with a grimace. Seeing this, Lillian couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Was I being excessive? She wondered. Bet's brows suddenly shot up in realization as he looked down at his abdomen, expecting to see the gaping wound that had nearly killed him earlier, only to find it completely healed. At least the weaklings are somewhat useful, he thought before shifting his gaze toward the battle ahead. Ah! Vannergand! We need your help, Lillian said as she picked up Bet's twin swords from the ground and handed them to him. Bet only needed a single glance to understand the situation. Clicking his tongue, he took the weapons without even looking at her. As expected of useless weaklings, can't get anything done without me. Naturally, he didn't forget to throw in his usual insults as he shot forward. Hearing this, an angry vein popped on Lillian's forehead. You know what? I take back the fact that I felt bad for slapping him. Maybe I should have slapped him harder. This is why I don't like werewolves. She puffed her cheeks before rushing toward the battle herself. The situation on Riva's side of the battlefield had reached its peak intensity. Elise and the others were barely holding back her relentless assault. Elise, Kagaya, Asfi, and Fulgur fought at the front while the others supported them from behind. Even with their enhanced strength as a result from Judas' buff, fighting Rivas remained extremely difficult. But it wasn't as if Rivas had an easy time either. To her, battling this group of adventurers felt no different than trying to break through an adamantite wall that simply refused to fall. All she could do was keep attacking little by little, attempting to slowly wear them down. It was a makeshift team composed of members from several different familias who had only begun working together today. But it was also a team that had fought side by side on their descent to the 24th floor, and their teamwork had quickly taken shape. Besides, they were all veteran adventurers who had spent years exploring the dungeon. Working alongside unfamiliar faces from other familias was nothing new to them. Even Lafia and Philvis had begun to adapt to their roles. Bit by bit, their mindset had quietly shifted. They were no longer treating Rivas as a person. She had become a monster Rex in their eyes. A floor boss that needed to be put down. After Asfi hurled a series of explosives in Rivas' direction, forcing her to create some distance, Philvis noticed that Lafia's movements had begun to slow. Lafia's thoughts drifted back to the moment earlier when Olivas had attacked Judas. I couldn't do anything. I completely froze, while his life was in danger right in front of me. She bit her lip. Did I get complacent somewhere along the way? Lafia! Philvis snapped her out of it. We are in the middle of a battle. This is not the time to get lost in your head. Philvis! Lafia jolted and turned to look at her. Philvis took one look at her expression and sighed. I know what you are thinking about. But dwelling on it right now won't do either of us any good. Get your head back in the fight. If you keep this up, you'll become an actual liability. Have more confidence in yourself. If you really want to help him, then the best thing you can do right now is give everything you have to what's in front of you. Philvis added with a serious expression. Hearing those words, Lafia tightened her grip on her staff. She's right. She closed her eyes and began chanting. Unleashed streak of light, all limbs of the holy tree. You are an expert of the bow. Perhaps after learning concurrent chanting, she had become complacent, thinking she had already progressed far enough. But her goal lay beyond that. I want to get closer to them. I don't want to just watch their backs like a princess waiting to be protected. I want to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. Shoot, sniper of the fairies. Penetrate, arrow of absolute accuracy. With renewed determination, Lafia opened her eyes and aimed carefully at her target, waiting for the perfect moment. My current self is still too weak, so the only thing I can do is lighten their burden. Even if it's just a little. Revis turned her head just in time to see the amber-haired elf preparing to release her magic. I will use you as a stepping stone to grow stronger. And the way I do that is by giving everything I have right here, right now. Arc's Ray. A beam of brilliant light shot from the tip of Lafia's staff. Annoying. Revis raised her sword and met it head-on. The collision produced a small burst as she swatted the beam aside with a flex of her arm. Such pitiful magic. Do you really think that will work on me? Revis said coldly. But the moment she finished speaking, Elise and Kagaya appeared before her. You're right, it won't. Lafia said with a quiet smile. But it was enough to make you show an opening. Elise and Kagaya struck simultaneously, forcing Revis to block their attacks with her sword. The force pushed her backwards several meters. The moment she attempted to counterattack, a rain of arrows and several spells came flying toward her. These annoying little bugs. With a single swing of her sword, she knocked the projectiles aside. The pressure generated by that swing alone felt like a hurricane tearing across the battlefield. D.O. Grail. Philva stepped forward, summoning a circular barrier of light to shield everyone behind her. These flies are starting to get on my nerves, perhaps I should eliminate them first. Revis thought as she bent her knees and launched herself toward the Hermes Familia members. The moment they saw her rushing toward them like a charging monster truck, their faces went pale. Where do you think you're going? A rough voice suddenly rang out. Revis twisted her body just in time to block a blade from the side. Clang! Her sword collided with Bet's. You! Revis stared at him in surprise. What's the matter? You look like you've seen a ghost. Bet grinned as their weapons clashed repeatedly. Don't get cocky. Revis roared, unleashing a powerful slash. With her level 6 strength, Bet was immediately overwhelmed, one of his swords being knocked from his grasp. This time, I'll make sure to finish you. Revis raised her sword for the killing blow. But before she could strike, Elise, Kagaya, Asfi, Fulgur. They appeared all at once and attacked from every direction. Mutt, about time you woke up. Did you enjoy your little nap? Kagaya said with a mocking smile. TSK, shut up. Bet clicked his tongue before jumping back into the fight. Shit. Faced with attacks from all sides, Revis was forced onto the defensive. Damn it, these pests are actually pushing me back. She ground her teeth in frustration. There were no more Violas or Viscom left to command. Judas had already destroyed every last one of them. Before Bet joined the battle, the situation had been a stalemate that leaned slightly in her favor. Her regeneration made her nearly impossible to finish off right away, and she had been content to grind them down slowly. But now the balance had shifted. She was being overwhelmed. Then, for the first time since the battle had begun, a word surfaced in the back of her mind. Defeat. Chapter 215, Jewel Fetus Tag. The Colosseum on the 37th floor had been reduced to nothing more than a wasteland. Judas and Olivas moved at terrifying speeds, their figures flickering across the battlefield, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. Boom! Boom! With every clash, violent shockwaves erupted, sending nearby monsters flying. Some were blown apart, others simply evaporated from the sheer force. But the one who clearly held the upper hand was Judas Spade. As I thought, there is a dissonance between his body and mind. The same side effect that occurs after an adventurer levels up. And he has yet to properly control his strength. Otherwise, he would be much more difficult to deal with. He thought as his figure blurred, dodging a massive boulder hurled in his direction by Olivas. Light cannon. A beam of light fired from his palm. Sensing the danger, Olivas twisted his body and narrowly avoided the attack. But in the very next instant, Judas appeared right in front of him. Without giving him time to react, Judas drove a powerful kick straight into his stomach.
The impact launched Olivas upward, sending him crashing through the hole in the ceiling above.
Judas tilted his head up, then flew after him without hesitation.
Rivas instinctively understood that her defeat here was becoming a real possibility.
She was struggling to keep up with their combined assault. However, instead of getting angry, she took a deep breath and calmed her mind.
There is no point in continuing to fight these adventurers. I would like to kill more of them, but that is going to be difficult.
She reined in her killing intent as she recalled her original goal.
That's right, the jewel fetus that we nurtured here. I must get it back. That was the reason why the 24th floor had reacted abnormally.
They needed to provide nutrients to grow another jewel fetus after the previous one had been lost during their last confrontation with the Loki Familia. She had originally planned to kill everyone here before retrieving the jewel.
But now,
she had changed her mind. Her gaze briefly landed on Elisa's bag before she launched herself forward. The sudden shift in Rivas' movements caught Asfi and the others off guard. She had completely abandoned any form of defense and charged straight toward Elise. It was then that they immediately realized what she was after.
She's after the jewel. Elise, be careful. Asfi commanded as she flew through the air with her Teleria wings. Everyone quickly adjusted, attacking Rivas from all directions.
However, she ignored them entirely. Whether it was Kagaya slashing at her, Bet stabbing into her, or Lafia bombarding her with magic, she endured it all with her naturally durable body. Of course, it wasn't as if she escaped unscathed. The damage gradually accumulated, and waves of pain detonated throughout her body. Despite being covered in injuries that would have made anyone scream in agony, Rivas merely let out a low grunt, her gaze never leaving Elise.
Now that I see you up close, you do look a little like me,
Elise said, somehow managing a grin even now as she reached into her bag. Though I'm clearly the prettier one, of course. She pulled out the jewel fetus and tossed it into the air. Caught off guard by this, Rivas halted mid-step and raised her head, only to see Asfi flying past and catching the item in her hands.
Got it! Asfi exclaimed before immediately flying away. Rivas blinked once, then twice.
Her eyes twitched. You. She could practically feel her blood pressure spike. Her attention locked onto Asfi's retreating figure as she prepared to give chase. But in that brief moment of distraction, her guard dropped.
And someone took advantage of it.
A feminine voice reached her ears as Kagaya appeared behind her and sliced off her arm. That's payback for earlier, you red-haired bitch, Kagaya said coldly, a faint smile on her lips. Meanwhile, Asfi flew toward the pantry's exit. With Vanergan joining the fight, they should be able to handle Rivas even without me. For now, I need to retreat with this item, she thought as she held the jewel fetus in her palm, inspecting it closely. But suddenly, a wall made of plant flesh rose up and blocked her path.
Ha!
Asfi came to an abrupt stop.
What is going on?
As if answering her question, the ground beneath her exploded as plant monsters burst out and lunged toward her.
Violas!
Her eyes widened in shock as she quickly maneuvered to avoid their massive jaws snapping at her. Weaving left and right, she did her best to evade them. But one of the Viola's vines lashed out, striking her arm with a sharp, whip-like crack. The impact forced her to release the jewel.
Oh no!
Realizing her mistake, Asfi reached out to grab it. But the surrounding Viola's closing in made it nearly impossible.
Then, a blur flashed past,
and the orb was gone.
What? They still have allies?
Adjusting her glasses, Asfi stared at the masked individual now standing before her, cloaked entirely in black. She couldn't even tell if the figure was a man or a woman.
Did this person wait at the pantry entrance this whole time?
Rivas, who had witnessed everything, immediately shouted.
Ein, it's not complete yet, but it's grown enough. Take it to Inio.
The mysterious figure, now identified as Ein, gave a slight nod before turning to leave.
Oh no you don't.
Asfi moved to pursue,
but Ein simply raised a hand and commanded the Velas to attack. Are you kidding me? That person can control them too? With an army of plant monsters blocking her path, Asfi could do nothing but watch as the masked figure disappeared into the shadows, the jewel fetus in hand. Elise, everyone. I'm sorry. Asfi said as she retreated, the Velas continuing to pursue her. It's alright, Asfi. As long as we take down at least one of Evelis' executives, this entire trip will be worth it. Elise replied, raising her sword. Ha, you adventurers really think that will be easy? Riva sneered, her eyes sweeping over the remaining Velas that Ein had brought. Even with one arm missing, this will be enough to turn things around. She was just about to take control of them, when suddenly, the ground beneath the entire army exploded. The Velas shrieked in agony before bursting apart all at once, their plant-like remains scattering in every direction as a thick cloud of dust rose into the air. Everyone turned their heads as two figures emerged from within the dust. Judas, holding Olivas by the throat. It didn't take much thought to understand what had happened. Judas. He did it. Both of them, however, were in rough condition. Judas' clothes were torn in several places, cuts and bruises visible across his arms and torso. A thin trail of blood ran down the side of his face from a gash above his brow. But Olivas was far worse. His body was battered, no, he barely looked human anymore. His form had become unrecognizable, a mass of flesh bubbling and shifting beneath his skin, as if something inside was trying to break free. Dark, swollen veins spread across nearly every inch of his body, pulsing with a sick, uneven light. Parts of his skin had split open, revealing something black, glistening, and still moving. The stench coming from him was rancid. His mouth hung open as broken, incoherent sounds spilled out between labored breaths, fragments of words that no longer formed any real meaning. Whatever sanity Olivas once possessed was hanging by a thread. Kill, all of, ha ha ha. I can still. The power, it's still. He muttered, his cracked lips curling into a grin that no longer held even a trace of reason. A hollow laugh bubbled up from deep within his chest. Judas stared at him in silence, his grip firm and unwavering. He's already gone. His purple eyes scanned the ruined figure without a hint of pity. Like a failed experiment. Chapter 216, The Demise of Olivas Act. Even in this state, Olivas continued to fight back. A loud guttural roar tore from his throat as his right arm suddenly swelled at a rapid pace and came crashing down toward Judas' head. Instead of dodging, Judas simply snapped his arm out like a whip and drove his fist into Olivas' face before the attack could reach him. A giant convulsing mass of flesh went flying across the pantry before slamming into the wall and sliding down to the ground with a sound less like a thud and more like a wet splash, his body continuing to convulse where he landed. Riva stared at what Olivas had become and grimaced. Gross. And yet, Olivas tried to stand. His limbs twisted at unnatural angles as he attempted to push himself upright, his body refusing to obey even the most basic commands. One arm had swollen to nearly 3 times the size of the other, the skin stretched so thin it had turned nearly translucent, dark veins spiderwebbing beneath the surface like cracks spreading through glass. He made it halfway before collapsing back down with a wet, heavy sound. Then tried again. He still won't go down? Everyone watched with expressions caught somewhere between disgust and disbelief. Olivas finally dragged himself upright, and then kept growing. 3 meters. 5 meters. 7 meters. 10 meters. Before long, Olivas had transformed into a grotesque mountain of flesh, barely supported by his legs as pus oozed from his body. His torso had expanded grotesquely, his neck almost entirely swallowed by the bloated mass of his upper body. One eye had sunk completely into the flesh of his face while the other burned with that hollow, frantic light that had long since stopped belonging to anything human. When his gaze landed on bed across the pantry, something seemed to snap inside him, as if a switch had been thrown, locking onto a single target like a predator recognizing its natural enemy. Roar! A guttural sound rumbled from deep within his chest. He fixed his gaze on the crowd in front of him and charged,
barreling forward at a speed that had no business belonging to something that shape and size.
Oh shit! With every step Olivas took, the ground shuddered beneath them. Everyone fall back! Asfi shouted. Everyone except the first-class adventurers retreated immediately. Bet. I think that thing has its sights set on you,
Elise said, quickly piecing together what was happening.
You've got to be kidding me. A bead of sweat dripped from Bet's chin.
Olivas swung one of his massive arms down toward them. They threw themselves out of the way as the hand connected with the ground. The earth cracked and split apart like a broken mirror, a shockwave of dust and debris exploding outward in every direction. Fissures raced across the dungeon floor like jagged bolts of lightning.
Seeing that his attack had missed, the giant Olivas roared in frustration and continued his rampage. Hey! Olivas! It's me, you dimwit!
Rivas shouted as she too found herself being targeted.
The giant Olivas was no longer distinguishing between enemy and ally, it was attacking anything that moved.
She barely leapt clear in time as one of his swings nearly sent her flying, landing on her feet while her severed arm continued to regenerate.
That's enough!
Elise appeared directly in front of the giant, magic power surging and condensing into her fist.
Wrath of the Scarlet Beast.
The silhouette of a massive flaming beast blazed to life behind her as she drove her fist straight into Olivas' face. The impact staggered him, engulfing his entire upper body in roaring flames.
I think I broke some fingers. Elise winced quietly. As I thought. I can barely put a dent in him. The monstrous Olivas, staggered and burning from head to toe, simply flexed his entire body and snuffed the flames out in an instant before finding his footing again. However, I felt it. His body changed, he's not nearly as durable as he was before.
Elise grinned. Her goal had never been to damage him. It was to hold him still just long enough.
Now, for the others to move.
Bet and Kagaya appeared simultaneously from both sides, grips tightening around their weapons.
Die! Ha!
Their blades carved through both of Olivas' legs in the same motion, drawing a scream of agony that shook the walls. Before he could even begin to fall, Judas appeared directly in front of him.
It should be right here.
He muttered and drove his hand straight into Olivas' chest, fingers closing around the magic stone buried within.
Sensing the threat, the giant Olivas moved to retaliate. I'm tired of dealing with you. Judas didn't hesitate.
He crushed the magic stone. A sharp cracking sound echoed as he withdrew his hand, opening his palm and letting the shattered fragments fall to the ground.
He slowly raised his arm toward Olivas' stomach and clenched his fist. Olivas act, this is the end.
He delivered a single 1-inch punch. The impact rang out and Olivas' massive body toppled, then crumbled, piece by piece, dissolving silently into ash.
What a shame!
A deep voice echoed from the void, belonging to a mysterious figure lurking somewhere in the dark.
Another failure.
The figure smiled faintly before dissolving into mist. Judas felt his senses prickle. His gaze snapped toward a specific direction, eyes narrowing.
Elise and the others exhaled.
Rivas, on the other hand, had already begun to panic on the inside.
Are you serious?
A bead of cold sweat traced its way down her face. You gained all of that power and achieved absolutely nothing with it. The least you could have done was take down one first-class adventurer. It doesn't matter how strong you became, in the end, you were still useless.
She had already begun retreating, slipping away while their attention was still fixed on Olivas. Hey! Did you really think we forgot about you?
Bet's voice rang out from behind as he closed the distance and launched a kick aimed straight at her.
Rivas glanced back and snorted. Just you? Don't flatter yourself, mutt.
She said with open contempt and cocked her arm back. I'll break his legs first.
Bet caught the danger in an instant and turned his head. Boost me.
The shout carried across the area. Judas read his intentions immediately and fired a spell. Air burst. A burst of compressed wind erupted from a green magic circle, aimed not at Rivas,
but directly at Bet. Bet grinned and let it pour into his boots. Phosphort, a pair of mithril boots capable of absorbing magic and converting it directly into the wielder's own power. The wind howled as it flooded in. Bet felt the energy surge up through his legs like a current. Raw, violent, and hungry for release. Take this, you bitch. Shit. Revis threw her arm up to defend. The kick connected with a sound like a cannon shot. But to Bet's surprise, Revis held her ground. The earth beneath her feet shattered from the force, her heel burying itself several inches into the ground, but she didn't move. Looks like you're not strong enough, wolf. Revis met his gaze, something sinister flickering behind her eyes. Don't fuck with me. Bet snarled through gritted teeth. Hi-ya. A roar tore from his throat as his leg muscles coiled like compressed steel and he pushed back with everything he had. The magic boots groaned under the strain, hairline cracks beginning to spider across the surface of Phosphort. Revis' eyes widened slowly as she watched the cracks spread, racing further and further across the boots with each passing second, until they reached their limit. Phosphort shattered. Take this. Blood poured freely from Bet's lips. The wind-infused impact finally launched Revis clean off her feet and sent her hurtling across the pantry. Evolus. No matter how many times you show up, justice will always prevail. While she was still airborne, Elise appeared directly above her and swung her sword down. Agaris Alvacinth. Chapter 217, Another One Bites the Dust. Elise and Revis locked eyes as the former swung her sword down, the blade wrapped in flames, and drove it straight into Revis' chest. At the last moment, Revis' other arm regenerated and she crossed both arms to guard. Even so, the impact sent her crashing into the ground, a cloud of dust exploding outward around her. When the smoke cleared, Revis rose slowly from the crater her body had carved into the floor, dust falling from her shoulders. Fuck. I hate all of you. She stood up with visible difficulty. I just barely kept my magic stone from taking that hit. She took a step back, then another, until her back pressed against the massive pillar at the center of the pantry. Revis, it's over. Surrender yourself now. Elise called out, pointing her sword at her. Ha! Surrender? You really think you've won? Seeing that she was completely surrounded, Revis calmly placed her palm against the pillar behind her. This pillar is the core of the pantry. Quick question, do you know what happens if I destroy it? She wouldn't. Asfi's eyes went wide. Nobody needed to answer. They all already knew. She's going to bring the entire pantry down on top of us. Everyone immediately rushed toward her. But it was already too late. With left no choice and backed into a corner, Revis pulled back her fist. And smashed the pillar. With her strength behind it, cracks spread through the entire structure within seconds before it shattered into thousands of pieces. The pantry shook violently. Everyone looked up to find the ceiling splitting apart, enormous chunks of rock beginning to rain down. Kaya. Everyone, run. Leave anything that's slowing you down behind. Getting out alive is the only priority right now. With the pantry collapsing around them, Asfi immediately directed her familia toward the exit as the downpour of debris intensified. Judas reacted at once, summoning gentle winds to carry those who couldn't move fast enough toward the exit. Asfi caught this and gave him a quick nod of thanks. Lafia, Philvis, go. Lafia cast one last glance back before Philvis seized her by the wrist and broke into a run. Amidst the chaos, Revis seized the opportunity. She turned and ran straight toward the sinkhole Judas had created, using it as her escape route. Just you wait. I'll come back stronger. And when I do, I'll have my revenge. She vowed silently as she ran. Her objective of killing Judas had failed. She would have settled for taking down at least one first-class adventurer, but that too had slipped through her fingers. It doesn't matter. The jewel fetus has already been secured. The original objective was fulfilled. I just need to get out. Then she felt heat flickering at her back. When she glanced back, she saw them. Elise. Kagaya. Bet. Chasing her down without hesitation. These bastards seriously won't quit.
Under normal circumstances, she would have been able to outrun them. But with the injuries she had sustained, maintaining her full strength was no longer possible. To her right, the Far Eastern swordswoman. To her left, the red-haired captain of the Estria Familia. And closing in hard from behind, the silver werewolf, twin swords raised. In the same instant, Elise and Kagaya surged forward and brought their blades down in unison. Rivas tensed her legs and launched herself upward, the slashes carving through nothing but air beneath her. She caught a falling chunk of rock and landed her feet on it without breaking her momentum, something only possible with her supernatural agility. The pantry was coming apart around them, the ceiling giving way in massive chunks. Rivas used it to her advantage, vaulting from one falling rock to the next, using them as footholds. "Come here." But Bet had already anticipated her movement. He launched himself upward and drove an overhead kick straight down toward the top of her skull. Rivas twisted midair and crossed her arms to block. The impact sent a shockwave rippling through the air as the kick connected. Even with her guard up, the force drove her straight back down, and she hit the ground hard, a crater forming beneath her feet on impact. But Rivas was already moving before the dust had even begun to rise. She shot forward the moment her feet touched the ground. Elise, Kagaya, and Bet moved to give chase, but then... Watch out! A massive boulder dropped directly in their path, cutting them off and giving Rivas just enough distance to pull ahead. She didn't hesitate. Diving straight into the sinkhole, she committed to her escape. "Damn it! She's getting away!" Kagaya shouted. Then a blur tore past all of them, close enough to send their hair whipping sideways. "Judas?" Elise exclaimed. Judas hovered in front of the sinkhole, supported by his flying magic, and looked down. Rivas, who believed she had escaped, suddenly felt a chill crawl up her spine. She twisted midair. Their eyes met. Her pupils shrank. She saw him raise a single finger, pointing directly at her. Laser. A concentrated beam of light fired downward. Falling freely with nothing to push off of, there was no way to dodge it. The beam struck her magic stone dead center, shattering it completely. Ah, the noise. It's gone. When Rivas heard her own magic stone break, she didn't curse her fate. She simply closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. It's so quiet. Her life played out behind her eyes. In this incarnation, there wasn't a single memory worth holding on to. Everything she could recall amounted to the same thing, being used as a tool for someone else's schemes. Perhaps the link between her and the corrupted spirit that had kept her bound had finally been severed in this moment. What a pathetic life. She had lived only as a tool. Nothing more. Nothing less. Completing missions. Killing whoever needed to be killed. So this is how it ends. The last thing she saw was a pair of purple eyes looking down at her from above as her body quietly crumbled into ash. Just like that, two powerful executives from Evolus, Olivas and Rivas, had met their end. Chapter 218, Resolution. Seeing Rivas' body crumble to ash before she could even reach the ground, Judas exhaled slowly and flew back up to the 24th floor. The pantry was still collapsing around him, shuddering violently as chunks of the ceiling continued to rain down without pause. "Judas, let's get out of here!" Elise shouted urgently. Since the others had already evacuated, the ones remaining were Elise, Kagaya, and Bet, the ones who had stayed behind to chase down Rivas. Now that the enemy had been dealt with, they didn't hesitate. They ran. A massive boulder crashed down exactly where they had been standing just a second earlier. The ground beneath their feet cracked and buckled, massive slabs of stone splitting apart. The walls began caving inward, the entire structure collapsing in on itself at a terrifying pace. "Don't look back, just keep moving." The walls on both sides pressed inward, the passage narrowing with every passing second. Dust filled the air so thick it was nearly impossible to see more than a few meters ahead.
Damn it! The exit is closing.
Bet shouted as he saw the ceiling above the entrance beginning to collapse.
Everyone, get down!
Judas shot forward and thrust both palms upward.
Telekinesis.
Using his power, Judas held the collapsing frame in place just long enough to keep it open.
One by one, they rushed through.
The moment they crossed the threshold,
the entire pantry collapsed.
The sound was deafening. A thunderous crash shook the floor beneath their feet and sent a violent wave of dust and debris blasting through the passageway, knocking several people off their feet.
Then silence.
Everyone lay or sat where they had ended up, gasping for breath, coated in dust and blood and barely held together.
Is everyone all right? Asfi asked, her voice laced with genuine concern.
Elise responded with a tired thumbs up. Lillian lay flat on her back, staring up at the dungeon ceiling with her chest heaving.
We made it. She wheezed. Nobody responded for a while.
They were either spread out on the ground breathing hard or too drained to form words as the adrenaline slowly left their bodies. And so, the mission was complete. After a brief rest, they made their way back to the surface. By the time they reached the 18th floor, the Hermes Familia had decided to part ways. Captain. I'm sorry. We weren't able to recover Keek's body. Lillian said quietly as she approached Asfi, her expression downcast. Judas and the others turned to see members of the Hermes Familia carefully carrying the bodies of their fallen comrades, covering each one with a tarp. The mood grew heavy without a word being said.
Judas, is there anything you can do? Elise couldn't help but ask. Judas shook his head.
He had managed to pull someone back from death's door once before, but what he had done for Althea was something he couldn't simply replicate here. Too much time had passed. Their souls had already moved on. If their souls were still tethered to their bodies, maybe, but it's too late for that now.
There's no need to feel responsible.
Asfi spoke calmly as she stepped forward. They were adventurers. Every one of them understood the risks when they chose this life. We'll lay them to rest on the surface, so please, bring flowers if you can. Being an adventurer meant walking a thin line between life and death. This wasn't the first time any of them had lost comrades. But that didn't mean they had grown numb to such a thing. They had simply learned how to carry that weight. Judas could see it clearly. The grief tucked quietly behind their eyes.
Judas spade, everyone, thank you for avenging them.
Those were Asfi's final words before she turned and walked away with her familia. The journey back to the surface didn't take long. I guess this is where we part ways, Elise said, basking in the warmth of the sunlight. I'll be reporting everything that happened to Lord Dionysus,
Philvis added calmly.
Compared to before, when she usually carried an unapproachable aura, Judas noticed that she had opened up more, especially toward Lafia. I guess going through hardship together really does bring people closer.
All right. Take care, Judas said simply.
They exchanged nods.
Miss Philvis, let's meet again,
Lafia said with a warm smile. Philvis returned it with one of her own, small but genuine. After that, Philvis, Elise, and Kagaya went their separate ways. Judas, Bet, and Lafia returned to the Twilight Manor, ready to finally rest after such an exhausting ordeal.
But first, they went to Finn's office to report everything. I see. Olivas Act and Rivas are no more,
Finn muttered from behind his desk. Beside him, Ace listened quietly, though her eyes trembled slightly.
Judas noticed, but chose not to speak on it. It's a shame you couldn't secure the jewel fetus.
But regardless, you all did well, Finn said with a measured smile. With Evolus losing 2 first-class combatants in a single day, it was a massive blow to their forces, good news for Orario as a whole.
But that transformation Olivas went through, what could have done that to him? Riveria wondered aloud, resting her fingers against her chin. Judas said nothing.
He had his own suspicions, but kept them to himself.
After the meeting concluded, Judas took a bath before heading up to the roof to watch the sunset. It was faint, but that was definitely mana. There's no mistaking it, he thought, clenching his fist.
As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sound of footsteps reached his ears.
He turned his head. Ace sat down beside him. It seems like something is on your mind,
she said quietly, her gaze fixed on the horizon.
I guess, but I could say the same about you, Ace.
After that, neither of them spoke.
They simply sat there, sharing the silence, watching the last light of day fade into night.
When the sky had fully darkened, Judas finally spoke again.
Are you upset? I know there were things you wanted to ask Rivas about your mother.
Ace turned her head, her golden eyes meeting his.
I don't care about that anymore. What's done is done.
She placed a hand over her chest.
No matter what, the memories I have of my parents will stay with me.
Then she looked at him.
What about you? What's on your mind?
Their eyes remained locked. Then Judas shifted his gaze and looked up at the night sky.
I think. A brief pause. My past is starting to catch up to me. Chapter 219, The Venerated One vs. Vannergand.
A week had passed since the fiasco on the 24th floor. Nothing too eventful happened, as Judas had immersed himself in training, spending most of his time meditating and sparring alongside Ace and the others.
Mana core repair progress is at around 55%. Judas thought as he opened his eyes.
Around him, he could see fellow members of the Loki Familia going about their routines, sparring with one another, maintaining their weapons, and preparing for what was to come. With only a few days left before the upcoming expedition, most of them were pushing themselves to the limit, trying to grow stronger while making final preparations.
Hey, Judas, let's fight.
At the training grounds, an unexpected figure approached him for a sparring match.
Bet.
Judas lifted his gaze, meeting the fiery eyes of the silver-furred werewolf.
You want to test your new level 6 status against me? Judas asked, cracking his neck.
After contributing to the defeat of Rivas and Olivas, Bet had earned the qualifications to rank up to level 6.
That left the Amazon twins trailing behind at level 5.
Much to their frustration. And it wasn't just him. Elise and Kagaya had also reached level 6.
And before long, the Astria Familia had officially become an S-ranked exploration familia.
They now stood alongside Loki, Freya, and Ganesha as one of the top factions in Orario.
Humph. If you already knew, why bother asking? And besides, I've wanted to fight you at least once since you joined the familia.
Bet snorted, twirling his twin swords while tapping the ground with his boots. His old pair had been destroyed during the battle on the 24th floor, and right now, a new Flossford was being made by the Hephaestus Familia. Seeing the battle intent leaking from Bet's eyes, Judas didn't refuse.
Oh? That werewolf is going to fight Judas?
Tiona, who had been training with her sister, turned her head toward them.
Oh, Judas versus Bet? Now this is interesting. Tioni added, wiping the sweat from her brow.
Naturally, a crowd began to gather.
It looks like Bet is finally challenging Judas. I wonder who will win.
One member of the Loki Familia murmured.
Are you serious? Of course Judas is going to win, that annoying wolf doesn't stand a chance.
Tiona said, raising her chin proudly.
That's right. Judas will obviously win. There's no way he'll lose to someone like that foul-mouthed wolf. Judas is an amazing human acknowledged by Lady Riveria.
A wolf with no manners.
Who does he think he is, stepping up just because he ranked up? A group of female elves chimed in.
They were the Fairy Force. Riveria's squad of elven mages. During their time training together, Judas had helped them improve, earning both their respect and admiration. Compared to Bet, whose mouth constantly spewed insults, it was only natural that they supported Judas. One thing Judas had noticed, his popularity among the female members was quite high.
Though it didn't really matter to him. Oi! I can hear you lot. Bet snapped, pointing in their direction. Especially you. You lousy Amazon. If you don't shut up, I'll beat you into the ground just like last time. Tiona humphed.
Dumb wolf, just wait until I reach level 6. She still remembered the embarrassing defeat she suffered when they sparred after Bet leveled up.
Judas! Beat him up, you have to avenge me. Tiona shouted. These two really don't get along, do they? Judas thought, shaking his head.
He had lost count of how many times he'd seen them argue.
Still, he knew there was no real hostility between them.
For lack of a better description, it was more like the bickering of siblings who would never admit they tolerated each other. Bet isn't exactly the type who gets along easily with people. But then again, there are all kinds in this world.
Judas recalled how some women were oddly drawn to certain bad boy types.
His gaze drifted briefly to a quiet, glasses-wearing human girl watching from the side, likely the only person in the entire crowd who was quietly rooting for Bet.
Line, was it?
Her voice was soft enough that most people probably hadn't registered she was even there.
Enough. Let's just get on with it. Bet shouted, taking his stance.
Ignoring Tiona's exaggerated mocking faces directed at him, he shifted his focus entirely on Judas.
Judas stepped forward and took his stance as well, activating his strengthening magic to bridge the gap between their levels.
The clash began. It had started as a casual warm-up before gradually, almost imperceptibly, turning serious. The people watching had been forced to create distance just to avoid getting caught in the fallout. The training grounds were soon littered with small craters. Shockwaves rippled through the air with every exchange. To most of them, the power of level 6 was beyond comprehension. All they could see were blurred figures and violent bursts of force erupting across the field. Yet that only made it more exciting. The moment both fighters shifted into high gear, Bet began to feel the pressure.
TSK. Damn it. I'm getting pushed back, it feels like I'm fighting Gareth. This bastard is a monster.
He clicked his tongue internally as he threw himself sideways, the spot he had just vacated now encased in towering spires of ice several dozen meters tall.
His instant casting is the real problem. I have to keep moving or I'll get buried. Despite holding the advantage, Judas found it difficult to decisively finish the fight. As a beastkin, Bet's agility was extraordinary. Even back at level 5, he was slightly faster than Finn and the others. There was a reason he was called the fastest in the Familia. And this is without the moon, or beastification.
Without Penitent Executioner boosting him, Judas could no longer call upon the level 7 strength he had displayed a week ago.
However, in this situation, I don't need it.
He rolled his shoulders, cracked his knuckles, and closed the distance.
Chapter 220, A Certain Rabbit Ranks Up.
Sometimes, a person's racial traits can grant advantages that aren't reflected in the Felna.
For example, if a dwarf and a Paolon were to receive their Felna at the same time and gained equal stats across all parameters, even reaching SSS in every category.
In a contest of strength, the dwarf would still prevail, even if their strength stat was identical. Though, he still falls short against Ace with Ariel.
Judas thought as his figure blurred, narrowly dodging one of Bet's kicks. Another minute passed.
The battle between them only grew more intense, the training ground suffering further devastation with each exchange.
In the end,
the one lying flat on his back was Bet, breathing heavily, his body covered in bruises. In contrast, Judas only had a few scratches, though sweat dripped from his body.
See?
I told you he would win, as expected of my chosen mate.
Tiona said with a satisfied smirk.
Sir Bet, are you all right? Line came hurrying over and crouched down beside him.
What are you doing? Get lost.
Bet snapped as he shoved himself upright, causing her to lower her head and step back.
Hey! Why did you go easy on me?
You were way stronger on the 24th floor.
Give me a straight answer.
And don't give me that garbage about being considerate of my feelings.
Only weaklings pull that soft shit.
Bet shouted, visibly irritated. He reached out to grab Judas' shirt.
But Judas stepped back, easily avoiding him.
Since Bet didn't know the details of Judas' status, he assumed Judas had been holding back, and that thought alone pissed him off. And to him, holding back against an opponent was no different from declaring them too weak to bother taking seriously. His pride couldn't sit with that. Knowing what Bet was thinking, Judas let out a small sigh.
I didn't hold back, Bet.
I just have a skill that gives me a conditional boost. It activated during the fight against Rivas and Olivas.
That's all. Judas explained calmly.
Bet held his gaze for a long moment, searching for any sign of a lie.
Judas didn't flinch.
Seeing no sign of deception, Bet clicked his tongue and shoved his hands into his pockets.
TSK, what a convenient skill.
Without another word, he turned and walked away, brushing off the healers who tried to approach him.
I don't need your help. And just like that, he left. No one followed. Except for Line, who hesitated, biting her lip.
Eventually, she sighed, seemingly deciding against it, likely expecting to be scolded again.
Judas watched this without stepping in. He could help someone with their training. He could help them get stronger.
But a man who hadn't managed to find a girlfriend across multiple lifetimes had absolutely no business dispensing love advice.
Whether Line's feelings would ever go anywhere was none of his concern. With his training for the day finished, Judas headed to the Familia's bath.
He was soaking in the large communal bath, towel draped over his head, when the door swung open and a dozen or so sets of footsteps came filing in.
Oh, Judas, you're here early. Cruz Bustle was the first to speak, a level 4 Chianthrope.
Judas turned his head to see them entering, half naked, towels wrapped around their waists.
He raised a hand and waved. This wasn't the first time they had bathed together.
Through moments like this, he had gradually grown closer to the lower-ranked male members of the Familia. Most of the conversations were started by them, but still. The initial awkwardness of being a newcomer, that subtle sense of not quite belonging, had quietly faded away. Without even realizing it, Judas had become one of them. He had fully integrated into the Familia. Water splashed as Raoul dipped into the bath with a relieved sigh.
Ah! Judas, you were amazing out there. I couldn't even follow your movements,
Raoul said as he leaned back.
It was nice seeing you beat Bet up, something a lot of us have wanted to do for a long time. Cruz added, stepping into the bath.
Ha ha! The way he acted tough while covered in bruises was hilarious.
Serves him right. Orba, another level 4 Chianthrope, laughed as the others joined in.
Oh!
I think I hear Bet coming this way,
Judas said, turning his head toward the door.
The laughter died instantly.
Cruz, Orba and the others went visibly pale, color draining from their faces as they broke into a cold sweat.
Wait. Bet. We can explain. They turned, only to find no one there. The realization landed a beat later.
Several twitching expressions turned slowly back toward Judas.
You brat! You almost gave us a heart attack.
Cruz launched himself across the bath toward Judas, fully intent on getting him in a headlock. Judas was already out of the water and 3 steps away before the arms closed around anything.
You're too fast. The least you could do is let me catch you,
Cruz said with a look of pure frustration.
Raoul let out a quiet laugh and scratched his cheek. I'll head out first,
Judas said, turning to face them as he reached for his towel. What followed was a moment of silence as every man in the bath inadvertently glanced in a specific direction.
Then glanced at themselves.
Then clicked their tongues in quiet, collective resignation. This world is genuinely unfair, Orba muttered with a sigh that carried the full weight of defeat. After changing into fresh clothes, Judas found Ace in the living room, a piece of paper held in both hands. The other girls gathered around her.
Wow! Miss Argonaut is amazing, Tiona exclaimed excitedly. Are you serious? Tioni added, arms crossed.
When Tiona noticed Judas approaching, she grabbed the paper from Ace and shoved it toward him.
Ah!
Judas, look at this, you won't believe it. Judas instinctively stepped back as she pushed it too close to his face. When his eyes finally landed on it, the first thing he saw was Belle's face printed front and center.
It's about time.
It was a poster
announcing her rank up to level 2.
That wraps up this part of What If a Venerated Soul Reincarnated in Danmachi World.
Thanks so much for listening.
As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well.
See you in the next one.